Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all to a brand new episode on the Boombox Guru. I'm your host, LB, and on today's show, we're going to be doing a album review, or better yet, we're going to be revisiting one of my favorite hip-hop albums of all time, because today is actually the 25th anniversary of this album. Yes, today on August 27th, this is the 25th anniversary of Outkast, ATLiens. Yeah, released on August 27th, 1996 on LaFace Records. And not only is this my favorite Outkast album of all time, but it's one of my top 10, top 5 hip hop albums of all time. It's just one of my favorite hip hop albums of all time. It's an album that I listen to on a regular basis. I've never gotten tired of it. Usually when I go on the Outkast kick, this is usually the first album that I go for. I listen to it the most out of any one of my other Outkast albums that I have on CD. This is the one that I always go to. But I know, I believe it was a long time ago on this channel, I actually did an album review on ATLiens. That's probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I think I was sitting in my car on my lunch break at work when I did it. I actually did it from my phone, now that I recall it. Yeah, so I did do an album review on this a long time ago, man. But so this is more of a revisiting of that album because of the 25th anniversary, and because I think that I do a better job at this now than I did back then. So let's get into this album, or this revisit, as you want to call it. So, like I said, ATLiens, it was released on August 27th, 1996 on LaFace Records. And this was Outkast's second album. Their first record, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, was released 2 years prior in 94 on LaFace Records as well. And that album was a huge success as well. They had a few big hits from that record. Probably the biggest one being Players Ball, which has become a signature song for Outkast. Then the title track, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, Get Up, Get Out, and Get Something. And I want to say, I think that was it. Yeah, they also had the Players Ball remix as well. But yeah, I think those were the only singles that came out of that record, and it was a huge success. And that album was one of the albums that really helped to bring Southern hip hop on the mainstream scale, and it really helped shed a light on the Atlanta hip hop scene. And I will also argue that it really helped to formulate and shape the Atlanta hip hop scene, because prior to that record and other albums, hip hop albums coming out of Atlanta, a few other ones like Ghetto Mafia, the Hard Boys, to name a few, Atlanta was mainly known for like booty shaking music. They were pretty much doing what Two Live Crew and Luke were doing down in Miami with Miami bass. But anyway, Outkast in '95 at the Source Awards, the infamous Source Awards, where Suge Knight got on stage and dissed Puffy. Outkast won for Best New Group that year, and I think they was up against like Mobb Deep, Smith and Wesson. I forget who else, but they were mainly up against like some New York like duos and groups. And the Source Awards were in New York that year. But when Outkast went on stage, they got booed. People were booing them. And that's when Andre famously made that statement, "The South got something to say." And the way that they felt about that whole situation, they took all those emotions and they channeled that into the music. And I also read where they decided that they wanted to like mature with their content. They wanted to take it to the next level compared to the previous record. I think they went on a trip to Jamaica. Yeah, they went on a trip to Jamaica, where they decided to no longer comb their hair. This was the period when Andre 3000, he famously had the freeform dreadlocks, and they just took on a whole different direction with this record. And this was also the first album that the duo started to produce some of their own music. As a matter of fact, the two biggest singles from the record were actually produced by Outkast. And this record was also, it was a huge stark departure from the debut, because Southern Playalistic had more of a funky, soulful vibe to it in some ways. In a nutshell, Southern Playalistic was more of a party record, I would say, and Dre and Big Boy had more of the image of like pimps and gangsters on that record. Although there were songs that showed hints of where the duo might be going with their next record. You know, songs like Claiming True, Crumbling Herb, of course, Get Up, Get Out and Get Something with Gip and CeeLo from Goody Mob. There were some hints of where the duo were kind of heading with their mindset. But this album, you know, it featured more of like sci-fi themes and a huge experimental sound. You know, in keeping with the title ATLiens, they did a really good job at keeping up with that theme. And like I said, man, there was a whole maturity in their lyrics and subject matter. You know, they talked about a lot of unconventional things that most artists at that time in hip-hop weren't really talking about. You know, they were talking about space travel and extraterrestrials on this record, man. I don't think too many hip-hop artists were doing that at the time. And the music just had this like spacey soundscapes with elements of trip-hop, dub, reggae, and psychedelic rock. You know, all of those were like formulated to create this unique sound on the record, man. So let's get into some key songs on this album that I like. And I wanna say this. It was hard for me to pick key songs from this album, because honestly every song on this record is a key song. But you know, usually when I do this, I try to keep the key songs to a minimum of maybe 3 or 4 songs. But it was really hard for me to do this, because there's so many songs on here that I consider my favorites on here. So I urge anybody that's watching this video that if you come across this album, listen to the whole entire album. I mean, you can definitely let these songs be the key, the gateway into getting you into the record, but listen to the whole entire album, because it's a wonderful record. I wouldn't call it one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time for nothing. So anyway, let's get into the first key song, which is the title track, ATLiens, which I believe was the first single off the album. And like I said, this song was actually produced by Outkast. And for a long time, I thought this song was produced by Organized Noise, because the beat sounds like something Organized Noise would have done, but it was actually produced by Outkast. And speaking of the beat, you know, I really enjoy that bass heavy, sort of funky beat, kind of boom bapish beat that the duo put together on here. And one of my favorite parts of the song is the whole weird kind of sci-fi vocal harmonies you hear in the background. You know, when it's like, I just like that part. It sounds so weird, that vocal effect on those harmonies in the background. That's my favorite part of the song. And not to mention the catchy hook. The catchy hook, like, throw your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care. If you like fishing grips and all the pimp shit, everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah. That's one of the catchiest hooks in hip hop ever. And it also expresses like their southern pride, you know. And Big Boy, his classic opening verse, you know, cooler than a polar bear's toenails, oh hell, there he go again talking shit. You know, and then Andre, his verses where he's expressing like his new sober lifestyle. You know, he talks about no more drugs or alcohol so you can get the signal clear and things of that nature. Him talking about his lyrical abilities. He has a stronger weapon than an AK, his lyrical abilities. And just an all-around catchy song, man. I really enjoy it, man. It's one of my favorite Outkast songs. If I had a list of my top 10 Outkast songs, this would definitely be in the top 5. But I remember when this song came out, when I was a kid, man, it was all over the radio. The radio station, the big radio station down here where I'm from, in North Carolina, Power 98, man, they played the heck out of that song. Everybody, everywhere I went, I could hear that song. People in my old neighborhood, I used to hear cars rolling by bumping that song. And then my older cousin that stayed right behind, like my grandma. I remember one time we was down there at my uncle's house, and he was in his room jamming out to it. The song was really huge, man. It was really huge, especially around here where I'm from. So I grew up with that song. So the next track, key song, is Jazzy Belle. This is another one of my favorites off of this record, man. And this is the only single that was produced by Organized Noise, but the single that was released wasn't the version on the album. It was a remix version done by somebody named Swift C, and Babyface actually sung the hook and was in the video. And I actually remember that video when I was a kid. But I like this song, man. I like the original version, the album version, better because I really like the beat. The beat has this kind of like tribal / like trip hop inspired beat, and the song lyrically is Dre and Big Boy discussing a more mature view of women. They're talking about how they want. They're talking about how they want stand up women, women with morals. Which I thought was really interesting because at this time in hip hop, man, most rappers, man, they weren't talking about stand up women. They weren't talking about real women. They were talking about like hoes and like the chicks that you meet at the club that you take home and have one night stands with, and pimping and all that type of stuff. They was all on that player vibe, which is what Outkast was sort of on the first record. But on this song, they took a different direction. They're just talking about this whole reflective view of having like a not a perfect woman, but just a good woman. And then Big Boy expressing how he would want his daughter to grow up being a good woman, because he had just, at the time that they recorded this album, Big Boy had just had a daughter, I believe. He had just had his first child. Well, maybe not his first child, but he had just had his daughter around the time of this record was recorded, man. And so yeah, Dre and Big Boy, they just expressed lyrically like what they would, I guess not necessarily what they would want out of a woman, or how a good woman should be necessarily, man. But definitely a dope song with a great message. And then we get to Babylon, and I don't know how to describe Babylon. This song was actually produced by Organized Noise, but it has this really bass thumping, laid back beat. And one of the things that really stick out to me is in the background, you have this like haunting choral harmony in the background. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to like those Catholic churches who have those choirs, those choral choirs. It kind of sounds similar to that. Any of you that's familiar with the video game Halo, you probably know what I'm talking about, because those choral harmonies, those kind of haunting choral harmonies are all over that video game Halo. But the song, it talks about like religious attitudes towards like sex or whatever, and Dre talks about like having like these like kind of sexual urges like as a kid, and how him and other kids used to play like these kind of like risque games when they were little kids. Hold up, let me see if I could find the lyrics, man. Cause it was a real interesting song, how Big Boy broke that down. I mean, not Big Boy, but how Dre broke that down. But Big Boy's verse, he actually talks about his aunt Renee. I don't know if any of you have ever watched the episode on MTV, that show they used to have called Driven, but Big Boy's aunt Renee, she was a huge influence on Big Boy, because Big Boy is actually he's from West Savannah, Georgia, and he ended up moving to Atlanta to live with her, because I think he was like getting into trouble out in West Savannah. He was like out in the streets hustling and everything like that, and so his mom like had him go out to Atlanta and stay with her. And his aunt was she was a singer. She was a singer, and she always like encouraged him to push his creative side and so forth. And it was a big loss to him. And matter of fact, his whole family, when she passed away. But she passed away during the recording of this album. So here's some of the lyrics that Andre talks about in the second verse on Babylon. He says, "I'm fascinated by the way your nipples peek at me through your blouse. Freaky me, freaky you. Can't help but be aroused. Excuse me, Lord, lustful thinking, but that's the way we was brought up. Sneaking to watch Playboy that night. We all must be caught up in worldly ways. Chemistry between boys and girls is a lot like when we went to the woods and laid with the squirrels. During PE, we be exploring each other's privates, hunching with all our clothes on until we felt excited. Then oh, now it's on from here on out. Put your hands in the atmosphere if you know what I'm talking about. Now, if it's too harsh, then walk on out. And I see you on the next song. They call it horny because it's devilish. Now, see, we dead wrong. So, yeah, it's just about them. Them talking about, like, the whole, like, I guess religious attitudes towards sex and so forth. And like I said, Big Boy talks about, the passing of his Aunt Renee. But then towards the end of that song, he gets to talking about, like, people being critical of his lyrics. Because a lot of people felt like Big Boy wasn't as introspective as Dre, because a lot of his lyrics were based around, like, the street life and hustling and things of that nature. But, with this album, Big Boy proved that he's a lyricist as well. But and I'm looking at this on Genius. But, like, here's an annotation where people say, some people act like Big. Well, let me read the lyric first. It says, but they make it seem that my music and crime are a team, but I'm speaking the truth, not dreams. So what in the fuck they mean? My lyrics ain't clean. And here's an annotation that somebody did. Like, some people act like Big Boy is sensationalizing drug dealing, pimping, and violence in his music, which leads to actual crime in real life. But Big Boy's raps aren't inspiring crime. They are speaking on crime that already exists. It's just easier to make rap music the scapegoat for the crime that has been going on for hundreds of years than to deal with the crime itself. So I guess basically, that's just his own critique about how, at the time around this 96 era, this is when gangster rap, so to speak, was being really pushed in the media, being criticized in the media. And that's just that was his way of saying, like, this stuff existed. All the stuff we talk about in our raps existed long before rap music was even around. So, yeah, but a really dope song. Like I said, the chorus on that song is awesome. I don't know who the gentleman who sung on the chorus on that song was, man, but he did a great job. The gentleman that sung, it has sort of like a gospel feel to it, the way he sings. But yeah, another one of my favorite tracks on here. And then my last key song is E.T. Extra Terrestrial. And this is arguably the most interesting song on the album. And why it's so interesting is because the song has no drum beat. It only has this, like, eerie, atmospheric, ambient, dark sound, futuristic sound in the background. And it's just Big Boy and Dre spitting their lyrics, man. And they discuss different topics such as sinning amongst the youth and taking on opportunities when they're presented, man. But that's honestly the most interesting song on the album. The way that they just came on the song and they just started ripping it, spitting their rhymes with no drum beat, man. It was very unique and it was very risque. So, like, honestly, ATLiens, man, this is a groundbreaking album in my opinion. And for me, this is one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. And personally for me, it's an all-time favorite because, this record really showed and improved that Outkast, they were a force to be reckoned with. And that there was more to them than the whole stereotypical pimps and gangsters, like, attitude and image that they presented on their debut album, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music. It really showed that these guys were artists and that they were really creative. And, the production, the lyrics, the subject matter, they were all taken to the next level, on this album. And, from here on forward, I mean, the duo, they continued to progress with their artistry, and for me, ATLiens, this was the beginning of Cast's creative peak, and it set the stage for the experimental, forward-thinking nature of their subsequent releases, man, because the way I look at it, if it wasn't for ATLiens, then you wouldn't have got Aquemini, and we wouldn't have got Stankonia, and or even like Speaker Box and The Love Below and Idle Wild, because even though I'm not a huge fan of those particular records, but the way I always looked at it, and I talked about this in another video, ATLiens, Aquemini, and Stankonia to me are a trilogy. To me, they form like a trilogy because ATLiens was that beginning of Outkast really, like, being risque and stepping outside of the boundaries, being very unorthodox. And then they just took that to the next level with Aquemini, because that record was even more unorthodox. Even though they kind of brought back the more funky elements of the debut album, they still like took that sound to a whole nother level. And then they did it even more so with Stankonia, man. So to me, ATLiens was the beginning of that creative peak for Outkast, man. And I can't get enough of this record. It's my, like I keep on saying, man, it's one of my all-time favorite hip-hop albums. It was the first time I ever heard Outkast, and well, shoot, while I'm here, man, let's talk about the song Elevators. Elevators was a big hit as well. And that song was like very reggae and dub inspired and very trip hopish, man, with those, man. And that's another song that Outkast produced. That's crazy that the two biggest singles from the album were produced by Kaz, man. They did such a great job, man. And yeah, Elevators, man. Elevators has become that song is sort of taking on a life of its own because everybody knows that hook. Me and you, your mama and your cousin too, rolling down the strip on Vogues, coming up slamming Cadillac doors. Everybody knows that, man. Even people that may not even be that much into hip hop know that song, and it's got to be one of the most referenced songs in hip hop. Cause I'm hearing so many artists now reference that song in their songs, man. So that song has really took on a legacy of its own. And I remember that video being weird, man, when I saw it as a kid, because they used to show it on BET quite a lot. I didn't really understand what was going on in that video back then, because I was like 6 or 7 years old when that dropped. But just an awesome album, man. Outkast, ATLiens. I know there's some sort of like a division amongst fans. You got some people that say ATLiens is their best record. Others that say that Aquemini is their best album. Well, it's pretty obvious that I'm the ATLiens guy. You know what I'm saying? And don't get me wrong, I enjoy Aquemini too. I listen to that album quite a bit myself, but for me, this album is where it's at. And I just want to say a happy 25th anniversary to this album, man, because it's definitely deserving of all the accolades that it's getting, man. I mean, it's a groundbreaking record. I want to show you guys this. If you get the CD, it has a comic book in it, which I thought was really cool. It has a comic book in it. That was cool right there. But well, I mean, you look at the cover. The album cover art is like a comic book anyway. But yeah, definitely one of the dopest album covers in hip hop too. No doubt about that, man. But yeah, I was really excited to do this video and talk about this album. This is another album that I could talk about for another whole hour maybe, but just one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time, man. A big shout out to Outkast, man, for putting out one of the dopest albums of all time, man. And man, I hope Outkast can come back together one day and give us another classic, man. But this record, man, happy 25th anniversary to ATLiens, man. Definitely a groundbreaking record. So many people were influenced by this record. So many artists. I've heard artists such as Isaiah Rashad and Wiz Khalifa saying that this record was a big influence on them, and that it's one of their favorite albums. I know when Kendrick Lamar, when he dropped Good Kid, Mad City, there was a few songs on that record that kind of had that ATLiens vibe to it. A lot of songs, like the song about Shireen, and there was a few other songs on that album that had like sort of like a ATLiens vibe to it. So this record definitely has stood the test of time. It's definitely influenced so many other artists. It continues to influence so many other artists, man. So just a happy 25th anniversary to ATLiens, man. And before I go, I want to also let you guys know that I actually did a tier list not too long ago on Outkast where I ranked all their albums. So be sure to check that out as well. I thought it was a real dope video. Audio's not too good on it because I think that was before I got the microphone. But in any case, man, it's still a dope video. So definitely go and check that out. And I hope anybody that's watching this video who's never heard of Outkast or who might want to get into their discography, hey, I recommend you start with ATLiens, man. This could be your gateway album. Definitely start with it. It's one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time, and I don't say that lightly. And I hope you all enjoyed today's show. Hope you all enjoyed this video. And I hope everybody is having a blessed day and a blessed week. And as always, love, peace, and music. Hope to see you guys soon. Peace out.